Welcome into the Power 2 here on College Football Addiction. TJ Pittinger, Cole Thompson, and Tom Hannifan, boys, back for another week. Going to talk a little bit about the UGA stuff going on. We preview Michigan State and Arkansas this week as well, and then talk some top rushing attacks. And then we have a surprise for the wild card. We're passing the baton over to Cole to figure it out. But all intros aside, how you guys doing?
I'm slowly dying, as you can hear within my voice. My lungs are trying to escape my body at this point in time. So, life is just dandy.
I consider myself blessed to be able to represent a conference that broke an NCAA record for the most teams in the Sweet 16. Tom didn't do that. The Big Ten didn't do that. The ACC didn't do that. We did that. And I'm watching a bunch of Nico Iamaleava highlights, which means Tennessee, congratulations. You have punched your ticket to the college football playoff in March because he made a throw to Chris Brazzell that wasn't dropped at the line of scrimmage. So it's a good start to a hump day, guys.
I have so a couple of thoughts, a couple of follow-ups on both of those things. First up, this is not a slight at Cole. This is not a slight at myself. I wish that my voice was as good as Tom's when I was sick.
Exactly.
Tom still has a better voice, no offense, Cole, than like both of us combined. And he's over here complaining about it. So,
man, when I was 12 and it dropped, calling other people's houses for homework was a challenge because you're like, "Hi, is Jessica there?" Click, hang up, call again. No, it's Tommy from class. It's not a 40-year-old man. So yeah, it's fun.
See, Tom, I'm still waiting for my voice to drop. So at 31, it will one day. We'll figure it out. Life will be a breeze, and then eventually I'll go from the little flute all the way down to sounding like that pedophile. It's all good. We're all excited.
Let's not go there. No, I have one.
Let's not go from Elmo to meeting up with Chris, whatever his name, Chris Hansen within 24 hours.
Let's not do that. This conversation, yeah.
The clicks will be through the roof on this one, though.
Yeah, exactly.
So
good start to the show.
Yeah, and then on the SEC, they're pretty good run. What I quickly on that, Cole. So yeah. I think people are fighting the wrong battles on the whole SEC thing. Like, I don't think anybody truly thought that the SEC didn't have the most great teams this year. I think the big argument was that teams 13 and 14 didn't necessarily deserve more, like a higher precedence because they lost to a bunch of good teams through the year. And then in the tournament, that ended up being proven out. And so, I think that's where people's big complaint was. I didn't see anybody really arguing that the SEC wasn't the best conference. I think people thought it was maybe a little bit of a stretch that Texas got in, that maybe 14 teams got in. So I don't know. I think that people that were beating their chest after the first round saying, see all your bad teams, they got in and they lost. That's what we thought they would do, were right. And then all the people that are like, look, we just broke the record for the Sweet 16. Those people are right too. But they feel like they're fighting against each other when they're arguing two different things, maybe?
I'm not going to go into too much detail with it because, look, the SEC still is reigning supreme on a Wednesday morning, and we are all able to say that this is the best basketball conference in sports right now. But I agree with you in sense of, okay, the only team that really you had to worry about was that 10-seeded who was the 11th ranked roster Arkansas team, which is this year's Cinderella, which is also coached by a 3-time coach of the year, who literally just needed a change of scenery and got right back to the second weekend for the first time since 2019. So it's I get that point. The emphasis that I get tired of hearing is people saying it's the Big East. That's supposed to be the basketball conference. It's sure, then actually start recruiting, put all your allocation and resources into landing these players in NIL. Don't let a $2 million player go to Kansas State and then be sitting at home and not being involved in the tournament when you only have 4 teams that made the dance and all 4 are eliminated. But this is supposed to be where your bread and butter is. This is supposed to be where your emphasis is. We're a conference that's all about creating an identity of basketball. And it's where's the identity? Oh, wait, it's sitting at home while Thursday rolls around and a Big 12 team, an ACC team, and the SEC, the Big 10 are going to reign supreme en route to San Antonio. That's on you. That's where your allocations need to be. I'm not really going to sit here and try and defend all that. Now, outside of really the Missouri loss, there wasn't an upset. There wasn't. The teams that we thought were going to lose, they were going to lose. Start putting out a better proof of concept, or in my opinion, start throwing more money in allocation because NIL is legal into your programs. That way you guarantee that when we have these conversations, an SEC team like Texas that probably didn't belong in is actually left out. But a team like Oklahoma that has to fight its way into the dance they're just simply left out. Start doing that if you're in the Big East or in the Big 12 or the ACC if you want to guarantee that spot.
Yeah, I look at the the fact that the SEC got so many teams in, and we'll get to football, I guess, here in a minute. But I mean, some of that falls on exactly what you just said. Like the ACC was terrible this year, outside of Duke, who certainly might be the best, but outside of one team, the ACC was terrible. Like if the ACC was somewhat competent this year, then yeah, like an NC State should have been in, right? Like, I mean, not based on their play, but just based on who NC State is. And they went to the Final Four last year. UVA, obviously extenuating circumstances with their coach leaving, but like, where's UVA? Where's NC State? Like that would eliminate some of this messes if other programs took care of their
Why
own.
is North Carolina a play-in team? Like, why are we dealing with that too? That's another thing.
Because Bubba got paid. Baby.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am flying high. I don't know, Cole, how deep you get into the baseball stuff after a walk-off grand slam last night in Jacksonville for the Florida State.
To complete the cycle too, right?
Dude, it was crazy too because I'm going to again. We will at some point get to
at some point talk football.
But I'm in a group chat, a big group chat with a bunch of people talking and watching baseball, and somebody said like I would suicide squeeze here, bases loaded, no outs, and I said no, I would literally just hit a grand slam for the cycle because I'm built different, and like. The next pitch, he hits it, and everybody was like, holy crap, like, were you on, like, the stat broadcast? I was like, no, I had no clue. I was just trying to be facetious. Like, I just thought he would, like, sack fly or something, or there'd be a play at the play, And, that was fun. And, series tied up between the Gators and Knowles, and the last one coming up in 2 weeks. So
I love the fact that when you go make a prediction, everyone says, oh, stat broadcast, you were ahead of us. Yep, totally. Just couldn't have an original thought that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, because I would totally, they could, the sarcasm of like hitting for the cycle. Apparently it's only been done one time in MLB history, hitting for the cycle in the grand slam like a walk-off grand slam that was for the cycle has been done one time in baseball history. Maybe somewhere in high school or something, but
sure.
Yeah, pretty extraordinary for that to have happened last night. So, all right, on to actual football things. I'll let Cole kick this off. Everybody has a hot take with this. I don't know if we'll get super hot take-ish or not on this. We kind of talked about it a second beforehand, but UGA's issues, continuing to have driving infractions, driving-related incidents, had a couple more last week. You can look at the stats. Everybody makes the funny memes and the graphics of, this many arrests driving related versus this many wins since December of this year or whatever, right? Like just thoughts, Cole, I'll let you kick it off on what's going on at UGA. It's a big deal, but like how big of a deal is it? Just kind of give us your opinion.
Well, I thought that it was actually a joke when you saw Nitro Tuggle arrested for speeding. Literally, I thought that was the perfect Mad Lib that somebody in the world of college football came up with, because how could you say Nitro at the University of Georgia driving in a sentence and not piss yourself laughing? That is just where I started. But you go into more detail. He was one of two arrests. Both have been suspended indefinitely from the team. One has been kicked off the team, the Ra Thomas incident. You also had the Colby Young incident. He is now reinstated with the team. And a bunch of other things have gone on since December of 2023. Everything that I have heard and spoken to around the complex, around the facility, they have done their due diligence to bring in the right people to try to steer the ways of good behavior. And unfortunately, nothing is working. Nothing. It's not like Kirby Smart is sitting here and saying, I'm too busy looking for my next 5-star offensive tackle that I'm going to turn to a first-round pick and better my odds of winning a national championship to care about what goes on in Athens PD departments when they have to call me at 3 a.m. It's not like that at all. They have brought in the right people. They have had conversations. They have met with players. They have had certain speakers come on in and explain how life can drastically alter in a moment. And unfortunately, it's not sticking. And so there is a culture problem internally with the University of Georgia. But here's the problem. Number one, it's not like Kirby hasn't done everything possible. There's only one more thing he can do, which leads me to point number two. You have to be willing to part ways with several of your premier players and not just give them a slap on the wrist to show, if you mess up at this institution, an institution that is known for not just a winning culture, but a certain brand and identity when we're around the community. In Athens, Georgia, the red and black is strong. It's nowhere near what the Atlanta Falcons red and black is like a blip on the radar compared to what you have in Athens, GA for these players, for the impact, for what this game is all about. And you're not willing to make that sacrifice. So if you're Kirby Smart and you're saying, if you continue to make mistakes, if you continue to put us in a situation where we are only talked about in a negative light, you are no longer welcomed on this program. But Kirby has to be willing to hold that type of accountability to everyone, including the 5-star tight end that he just brought in from Duluth, Georgia, because of that is somebody that he believes is an integral, impactful feature for this team moving forward. Whether it be a 5-star offensive tackle that was waiting in the wings to start for 2 years, he goes out and he gets a DUI driving 115 miles an hour. You have to hold them to the same standard, because you're not watching as those players are the ones that are getting in trouble. And maybe it's because they're not the ones getting in trouble, but the accountability from those guys needs to step on up, and they need to be willing to say, listen, do you want to help this team or do you want to hurt this team? Because so far, all we're getting is bad breaks on certain calls and bad calls off the field that puts us in the front headline for all negativity, which is something we don't need. We haven't been to a national championship in 2 years. We have a 12-team college football playoff, and here comes Texas rolling on in, and people are talking about them to be the next big-time team in the country in this conference from day one. So leaders have to step on up, but Kirby has to make the decision. What is more important, winning a title and then in the offseason dealing with 6 or 7 arrests, several phone calls from Athens County Police Department at 6:30 in the morning, and being willing to say, hey, I'll throw you off the team because of you were a backup anyways and you weren't going to mean anything, or actually hold standard and say, listen, we may go 9-3 this year, but that's because we had to let go of 6 dudes that we thought would get us to an 11-1 season. They didn't fit the identity of our culture. They didn't fit the identity of this program. We cannot have a bad egg bringing us down. And by the way, we're Georgia, damn it. We got to start acting like it.
Tom?
Yeah, I think the entire situation, it just makes me sad. And I hit exactly what Cole said, and that this feels like a culture issue, period. This is something that you don't want to blame it entirely on this new era of college football, college athletics, where kids are getting paid, because it's been going on before that, unfortunately, at Georgia. But we are in an era now where you have kids that are coming in and they're making more money than they ever thought imaginable. And I was so encouraged. We were joking about Dion and Fran the other week about possibly doing an inter-squad scrimmage for the spring game. And you openly heard them talking about education for young people at this point in their lives. And Fran Brown, the program I believe is called Syracuse 60, and trying to help football players get a job in something outside of football within 60 days of them graduating, something like that. So phenomenal perspective on what this is. And it's the thing that is a really scary point in time for a lot of these kids. And there's the element of agents being involved. There's the element of the money. There's the entertainment aspect of it. You have all these things at your disposal. It's not to say that college football players in the past haven't had these types of opportunities. It was just quieter. It was under the table in a lot of different respects. And it just worries me for the future of these young people, because these are 18 to 22-year-olds trying to figure out life, and somebody hands you $500,000. How are you going to behave? Do you believe you are invincible at that age? Everybody does. Okay, amplify that times 1,000, because you're playing for one of the premier brands in college football. So it breaks my heart. And I think the unfortunate thing is that this was, something in the news cycle a handful of days ago. And it already, we were talking about like, oh, should we even bring this up? Will it be old news? And that's the unfortunate thing, is that it is old news at this point. And this happens every year, and we just move past it because people only care about wins and losses and touchdowns and that sort of thing. And that's my overall takeaway from this thing, is that it's just heartbreaking. And I really do hope that the University of Georgia and the football program, Kirby Smart, continue their efforts. As Cole was saying, it's not for lack of trying, but this also comes down to the players that are there and the veterans reinforcing like, hey, we've got to get our act together, because if you want to be a decent human being and not negatively affect your life, the lives of others unnecessarily and recklessly, then this has to change. And I can even speak to watching as a Philadelphia Eagles fan. Jalen Carter might not have ever had the opportunity in the NFL because of similar off the field issues, and because he walked into a situation in Philadelphia with a strong veteran nucleus. I know for a fact those people around him have provided bumpers for him, so to speak, of like, hey, we're going to keep you in check. It's unfortunate that has to happen at a professional level. And let's be honest, this is a professional level now at college sports. It's been that way for a while, under the table. But gosh, I just, the whole thing breaks my heart. And I just don't want to see more lives altered by this, lives lost potentially because of this. You never know what can happen. And it's just something where if the players within that Georgia football team, past and present, come together to address this, it can improve. But it's sad that it's a culture issue, and it's really sad that we're just going to talk about it now. It happened last week, and we're just going to keep on moving on. And this is something that like really matters in the grand scheme of things.
Do you remember in the movie Remember the Titans where Gary Bertier throws his teammate and his best friend Ray off the team for not making a block?
Yeah.
Like, that's got to be the attitude of some of these veterans in the locker room whenever you're seeing the people getting arrested for driving 113 in a school zone. Like, that kind of has to be. I know that it's just a movie and it's fake, and no way in hell did Gary Bertier, an All-American from the state of Virginia, throw a player off the team over anybody on the coaching staff. But what I'm saying is that that's the type of attitude you have to have if you are one of these veterans in the locker room. And I get it. Culture, you can win with bad culture. I mean, TriStar brings this up in the comment section. You can win with bad stuff that happens off the field. But the problem is Tom brings up the fact that this is old news. It's not old news, though, because the problem is it's old news for the moment, and you know that new news in the same room, in the same building, in the same city is going to be coming out, because at this point, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk. If one arrest record's coming on up, a second one is probably not that far behind. And unfortunately, until there is that finite, consistent identity of a culture that is implemented by the players and brought down by the coaches, and everyone is on the same page, you're going to continue to see this. And so at some point, it is up to the players, it is up to Kirby, but you have to be willing to have that serious conversation. Is it worth getting rid of a 5-star toxic offensive tackle? And it may hurt your team, and you may end up giving up the most sacks on the left side in the Kirby Smart era if everyone in the building realizes, if I mess up, if I act the exact same way as him, and I'm nowhere near as valuable, I'm off the team for good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that kind of one-time example, but, again, what we don't really know this, but what is that? And this is very what do you call it? Rhetorical. Like, what is that punishment right now that kids are looking at? Because I mean, I've heard you talk about it, I've heard Pate talk about it, I've heard other people talk about, like, listen, Pate even said the other night, like, I know what they're doing, and it would make your jaw drop, like the punishment that they're given. I mean, who's to even say that being kicked off the team would really, deter this, right? Like, I'm not anti, punishment, but like, we got a lot of punishment for different laws that people break in this country, and people still break the laws, and so who's to say that if Kirby did institute like a zero tolerance, that it would even change things? That's where I think it's almost, I agree so much with what you guys are saying. It's almost not even the coaches instituting a zero. It's the players, man. I spoke with, and I know this is a very minor type thing, but I mean, I've spoken with different players at FSU when they weren't terrible. And they've said, like, no, man, like Jimbo didn't have to get on us. And, Dylan Gibbons, who transferred from Notre Dame, Atkins didn't have to get on us. We did that because we were leaders. Like, we got the guys in check. And so that's to me where, yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. Like, Kirby should make an example of somebody in a big time way and see if that cures it, because whatever he's doing isn't working. But I don't even know if that's going to work. Like, not to be negative about it, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's a negative situation. But it almost, if it doesn't come from the players, I don't know that it's ever going to change. I don't know that it's ever going to be any different, even if he does kick somebody off tomorrow for something they do. We'll see.
Nothing really else I can say on that.
Yeah. So we did the whole thing without any too crazy hot takes on that. So, all right. So a place we can have some hot takes. Old Sparty. Let's go up to Michigan State and talk about what Jonathan Smith has in year 2 now, and what we look like this year.
Yeah, I've realized that my Big Ten recaps or previews have been a little lengthy, and frankly, Michigan State just doesn't warrant taking too much time, because it is still very much a wait-and-see situation with Jonathan Smith as the head coach at Michigan State. So last year, finished 5-7, 3-6 in the Big Ten. Those 3 victories: home against FAU, home against Prairie View A&M, and at Maryland. So that was encouraging, at least early, for Michigan State fans. And then proceeding to lose 7 of the remaining 9 games. That was not encouraging for Sparty. Pulled off home wins against Iowa and Purdue. Their schedule included home versus Ohio State, at Oregon, at Michigan, versus Indiana, and at Illinois. They have 16 incoming transfers. Recruiting this looked like it was trending in the right direction for a few years. And the class of 2023 was ranked 4th in the Big Ten per on three. Since then, their classes have kind of leveled off, 43rd and 51st nationally, according to on three, and in the bottom half of the Big Ten. 2 4-stars in the class of 2024, wide receiver Nick Marsh, who had a considerable role last year in the offense with Aiden Childs at quarterback. More on that in a bit. Interior offensive lineman Rustin Young from the class of 2024, also a 4-star, and then 1 4-star in the class of 2025 in defensive lineman Derek Simmons. It does seem like Michigan State's backing is prepared to spend in terms of recruiting. So that's something just to continue to keep an eye on. Again, Jonathan Smith entering year 2. And historically for Jonathan Smith, going back to his Oregon State days, it's tough to get a big sample size of this. 2-10 in 2018, 5-7 in 2019. And then you have the COVID year in 2020, back down to earth at 2-5, then 7-6, 10-3, 8-4 in Corvallis. So at least it seems like there could be some sort of a jump for Michigan State. It still remains to be seen what this team is going to be, because, I talked about the games that they won. Like, this was not a good football team last year. And for the most part, they struggled to run the ball consistently. And even though they had decent tailbacks, it just wasn't there when it mattered for Aiden Childs, and Aiden Childs made way too many mistakes. The key games this year, and they have a tough schedule: at USC on September 20th, at Nebraska on October 4th, at Indiana on October 18th, home against Michigan October 25th, at Minnesota November 1st, against Penn State on November 15th, at Iowa November 22nd, and then versus Maryland on November 29th. This could be an identical 5-7 season, just like in 2024. I expect wins against Western Michigan, Boston College, with Bill O'Brien in the mix. I mean, like, that could really go either way, but I expect that to be a win for the Spartans. Youngstown State absolutely should be a win. The goal should be to be competitive against USC, Nebraska, UCLA, Iowa, and Maryland. Those are all potentially winnable games. I do think at best, I could see Jonathan Smith getting this team to bowl eligibility in his second season as head coach. They've had some turnover on the defense, which they're going to need to have some improvement. They've had some guys come in the transfer portal and depart. So it's just a matter of, like, okay, what does that actually look like as spring ball is getting underway for all these teams? So it's very much a wait and see. This offense, unfortunately, revolves around what is Aiden Childs going to be in 2025. Can he take a step this year? Can he cut down on the turnovers? 13 passing touchdowns to 11 interceptions. Some real head-scratching decisions this past year, but then you see his upside. He is an athletic freak. He has a cannon for an arm. There's so much that he can do within this offense that historically has been based around that pro style, run the ball and get your running back 25 to 30 carries a game. It's something that I could see Michigan State going to, with Tautalover coming in the transfer portal at running back as a senior. There's a lot of different backs that they could incorporate, and I think that's helped Michigan State historically to have kind of a running back by committee and a lot of thumpers, guys who are about 225 pounds. What the offensive line is really going to be, that was a factor last season. So I believe they have the people for Childs to get the ball to in the passing game. Defensively, they need to make strides. It's a very much a wait and see year for Michigan State, but I wouldn't be shocked if they somehow bowed up and made a bowl game in 2025.
This isn't a team that I think you can sleep on, because I am very high on what Jonathan Smith has been able to do, establish culture, and really bring that second win once he gets his culture established, like at a program. But you brought up Aiden Childs. At some point, is he on a leash? Because remember that this was a guy that was handpicked by Jonathan Smith out in Corvallis to lead the team. Wanted to give him a year, so they bring in DJU. He impresses. They go to Michigan State. He doesn't go after DJU. He says, I want Childs to be my guy. So now this is year 3 in the system. Do they feel like that they have a contingency plan in place to where if Childs continues to make errant mistakes, throwing into double coverage, missing reads, finding wide receivers and overshooting them on easy plays, that there is somebody they can turn to and go, we still are a good enough team to finish 7-5, maybe pull off an upset. We feel good about our quarterback room if Childs has to go out and we can't play him anymore.
Honestly, I don't know if that reliable number 2 is there. If they have to, I could see Jonathan Smith doing that, because Aiden Childs was inherited, I guess is the best way to put it. An interesting thing that we're now dealing with, Cole, and I know you thoroughly understand this, is that you shell out a lot of money for these high profile recruits at quarterback. There's a longer leash and the team is not as good. So I understand, to your point, okay, how much longer are you going to let Aiden Childs go out there and make mistakes? I honestly do think you see him take a stride this year. The offensive line play was tough for them this past season.
Sure.
I think you do see him tighten things up a little bit. I think he's going to be asked to do more in the running game, and that they were much more about the conventional handoff to the tailback this past season. He is a guy that if they, choosing to run him 10 times a game probably isn't smart for his long-term health, but taking advantage of his legs would make a lot of sense in 2025. So I just don't think there's that guy behind Childs right now that they're like, hey, you keep messing up, we're going to drop this guy in there and that's going to be the end of it. It's not even, a Mikey Keene, Bryce Underwood situation, which is apples to oranges, but you got like two guys that you at least can go with and you can have some modicum of success. It just feels like Childs has a longer leash. There's probably a good amount of money invested in him. And Michigan State with Jonathan Smith, I think the expectations are low at this point in time to like, I don't think they're going to lose their minds if this team doesn't make a bowl game this year. If they do make a bowl game, then it's like, man, we have the right guy here. And you could see an extension or something like that for Smith. And I think the Mel Tucker debacle is still fresh in their minds and they're going to want to stick with Smith.
Let's transition over to the SEC and talk about Arkansas a little bit. Last year, Cole, Sam Pittman had some of the highest odds to get fired, and he did not. He's back for 2025. I'm sure you'll get to it at some point, but what are his odds of being back for 26 is probably a question I have at some point in here. Thoughts on Arkansas?
The odds, according to Ranker this morning, number one coach still expected to be fired in 2020.
Poor Sam Pittman.
So sure. Let's pretend that Hunter Yurachich is actually listening to message boards and saying, I'm going to make change out in Fayetteville. They went 7-6 last year. They made it to a bowl game. They got the victory over Texas Tech, who was without their starting quarterback in Baron Morton. And of course, they had that signature moment, which they do every single year underneath Sam Pittman, beating a top 25 team and proving that things are at least as stable as they can be, whatever it is. It was against Tennessee. Malachi Singleton comes in for Taylon Green, and they get the victory despite not having a Taylon Green out there. There were a lot of blips on the radar. There was the second half comeback by Texas A&M in the Southwest Classic for the final time out in Arlington, Texas. Now this is back to being a home-and-home matchup. There was the double overtime game against a 3-9 Oklahoma State team that did have a quarterback when Arkansas probably just should have put Pell to the metal, and they weren't able to close out. There was the good first half against LSU and then debauchery in the second half. There was the immediate blowout in the record-setting performance by Jackson Dart against this secondary out in Fayetteville later on in the season. There was the late comeback by Missouri last season in the Snow Bowl that eventually led to the Battle Line Trophy going back to Como. So there were some moments to where you felt like, okay, this team is at least showing potential, but they also shot themselves in the foot and had too many self-inflicting wounds. They did go out in the portal. They landed, I believe if I'm not mistaken, 22 newcomers, including Omega Blake, the vertical wide receiver from Charlotte, AJ Green, the running back from Oklahoma State, Courtney Crutchfield, a Arkansas native, returns to the natural state after spending a year at Missouri. Marcus Dumerville comes on in from Maryland. Ismail Cease comes on in from Stanford. They also landed Mike Washington, the running back from New Mexico State, and Connie Walker, the cornerback from from Oklahoma. They lost a lot of talent. And I mean, yes, they lost some talent to the draft, Andrew Armstrong probably being the biggest name, but 31 outgoing transfers this year, including multiple key pieces like Patrick Kudis, now going down to Ole Miss. Luke Haas, the tight end, going down to Ole Miss. Tevis and TJ Metcalf, both joining forces in Ann Arbor to go play at Michigan. Isaiah Satenga goes on over to Arkansas. So they've lost a lot of names, which again, maybe isn't a bad thing, but it certainly does make your roster look completely different. 24 total recruits, number 33 ranked recruiting class for overall. They were number 14, if I'm not mistaken, among SEC teams. Key players they added in: 4-star linebacker Tavian Wallace, Madden Iamaliava, the younger brother of Nico Iamaliava, the 4-star quarterback out of Long Beach Poly, Kevin Otis, the 3-star defensive tackle from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Grayson Wilson, another quarterback coming on in from Conway, Arkansas, Jacaden Ferguson, the 3-star wide receiver from Missouri City, Texas. What is really the expectation for Arkansas is a big question that I think everyone has each offseason, because it doesn't feel like Sam Pittman is ever going to be fired. It just feels like they're waiting for him to wave the white flag and go off into the sunset and say, I did my best and I want to make change. And I think part of the reason you don't see him fired is because the money and the resources that currently are being thrown into the wells of the Arkansas athletic departments aren't towards football. They're towards basketball. They're towards baseball. They're towards softball. They're towards other sports, because there's an inclination that we're not going to be able to win a national title in football. We're not going to be able to put ourselves in the same conversation as Ole Miss or South Carolina or Missouri, for that matter, or even Texas A&M. So we're going to utilize our money into bettering our other sports to where we still are able to be a championship caliber program, just not in football. And they don't want to pay the buyout of what comes with Sam Pittman and hit reset on the roster for an organization that right now is kind of caught a crossroads between being 7-5, 6-6, 5-7, 4-8 every single year. Like, that is what you have. Well, my expectations are this year is, hey, it's a second year by Petrino as my offense coordinator. That's a good thing, because he handpicked the quarterback in Taylon Green. And Taylon Green, as I like to compare him to, is 2 a.m. Taco Bell, because of it all matters if you're drunk or sober. If you're drunk, it's amazing. Taylon Green is amazing. If you're sober, it's kind of messy. It's a little probably not your first take, and you certainly feel bad about the Tums that you're going to have to throw into your body later on. And that's the mistakes that you see Taylon Green make. Can he be drunk 2 a.m. Taco Bell going into year 2 with this system? I do like the wide receivers they brought in. I like the fact that they have 3 new starters on the offensive line. I want to see more consistency from the secondary. Travis Williams was hit and miss as a coordinator last year. A lot of people thought that he was going to be leaving this offseason. They gave up the 3rd most yards in pass coverage among any SEC team last year. And how many times, if you just take away 1 or 2 explosive plays, is Arkansas in this matchup? And you did see promise in several of these games. The Auburn game, they get 4 turnovers against Peyton Thorne, and they're able to put pedal to the metal and punch their ticket to a victory in Jordan-Hare Stadium, which is a massive win. But I wonder, can I find continuity? And the big thing that I just want to take away this year is, what does the future look like for Arkansas? Do they believe that they are a program that every few years, like South Carolina, like Missouri, like Ole Miss, like maybe you could throw in Oklahoma, which feels facetious, but still is, that they'll be a playoff contending team? They may not make the college football playoff, but 9-3 is not off the table. 10-2 is not off the table. We're right in the running going into the final stages of November, to where, hey, if one thing bodes in our favor, we're guaranteeing our spot to be able to at least punch our ticket to the college football playoff or be in the running. And I think that's something that Arkansas fans are also salivating at, knowing what they have. The college football gods hate Arkansas. They always have hated Arkansas. They will always hate Arkansas because of their schedule. They open up conference play on the road against Ole Miss. Then they go play host to Notre Dame on September 27th. A week after a bye, they have 3 of their toughest games in a row: at Tennessee, at home against Texas A&M, and then against Auburn. All teams that feel like that they have improved. Closing out the year with games against LSU in Tiger Stadium, at Texas, and home against Missouri on November 29th. I think this team is probably good enough to be a bowl win team. I think this team is good enough to get to 6-6. But is that what the expectations are for the Hog Faithful? That this is a roster that people believe should be just accepting a trip to the Liberty Bowl or the Texas Bowl or to the Guaranteed Rate Bowl or one of those bowl games? Because if that's what they want, it's totally fine with me. But if that's what you don't expect, that may be where you are at with Sam Pittman. My breakout player is Omega Blake. Last year, he led all of college football in yards after catch with 21.8. So he is a vertical threat, which bodes extremely well with Taylon Green's arm. And I think the X factor for this team is going to be this offensive line. It can't get any worse than it was last year. You got to give Green some ample time to throw. If he has his windows of opportunities, I think he is going to strike. Do not be shocked if Taylon Green leads the conference in passing yards and passing interceptions.
It feels like so early that Memphis game is pretty big. It's tough to see them going on the road and winning at Oxford in week 3. And then they have Notre Dame in town the week after Memphis, to where if they lost on the road at Memphis, which certainly won't be an easy one by any means, it feels like the wheels could come off. And you mentioned the schedule. They're going to have to pull a couple of upsets. They get A&M at home. They get Auburn at home. I think that both of those are somewhat winnable, because Arkansas always finds a way to win one game they're not supposed to. Yeah. But it feels like if they were to, they also seem to find a way to lose a game or two that they're not supposed to. If they dropped at Memphis it feels really tough to see them getting back on track enough with how brutal the schedule is. Maybe they pick up a win against Mississippi State, who comes to Fayetteville, but the schedule is so tough. And even if you're giving them the one win that they shouldn't get, whether that's A&M or maybe it is upsetting Ole Miss on the road or something like that, it feels tough to find a path to 3 upsets if you drop that game to Memphis. I think that's kind of the litmus test for whether, I mean, he could get, he could move on or get fired even if they do beat Memphis because the rest of the schedule is so brutal. But that feels like a really early season test to where if they lose that one, I don't really see a lot of optimism for Arkansas the rest of the way.
Here's what I just want to ask you guys. When you look currently at several prominent G5 jobs, so Spencer Danielson at Boise State or John Summerall at Tulane, and there's an opportunity for Hunter Yurachek to call you up and say, you want to coach at Arkansas, a place where right now it feels like that we'll give you $7 million a year, but you're not going to be playing for a college football playoff. You're not going to have an opportunity to win your conference championship. You're going to rank in the bottom half of recruiting rankings. You're not going to become a pipeline destination for recruits on the transfer portal side because Texas and Oklahoma decided to join. Are you touching that job, or are you going to stick it out in New Orleans and Boise and wait for a better opportunity that will offer the same amount of money, but maybe better resources and more allocations for you to be able to build a program and your image from the ground up?
Well, I want to know what my allocation, I want to know what my NIL budget is, right? You just brought in Coach Cal on the other side of things. And I know that football rosters are way more expensive than basketball rosters, but like, I want to know, can I have $20 million like Georgia's going to put into their football team this year? Can I at least have 15 million, right? Like what will you actually let me work with to go out and build a winner here? Because so the answer to that is maybe, right? What do I have? And can I have a 3 to 4 year runway to really build this thing? And can I have $20 million a year to go out and build a roster that is competitive and does, attract some talent to where I can use it as a stepping stone job, right? To where if I do a good job there, I can get something else. Now, if you're John Summerall at Tulane, would you maybe just hold out for the Ole Miss job to come open? Would you just maybe hold out for, there's another job 45 minutes from New Orleans that could come open if that team doesn't finally make the playoffs? So, yeah, I mean, it's a gambling game, right? Like if you're one of those coaches, because, yeah, I mean, SEC money is really great, but yeah, you go to Arkansas and you flame out there. I mean, you're never getting you're not getting another Power 5 job for 10 years. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly a gamble. These coaches are prideful, man. Like they bet on themselves and they think they can figure stuff out and they like, I'll be the one to turn it around. But that would be my number one question. Hey, you how much did you give Cal? All right, I want double that to build the football program, the NIL investment to build football.
All I will say is that Rhett Lashley has been rumored to this job for years. I do not think he would take it. I think he would stay at SMU. They would give him exactly what he needs to build a contender in the ACC, and he would walk away with a smile on his face, knowing that he has made it at Gerald Ford Stadium. That's my 2 cents.
Arkansas will be interesting this year. Let's do this. Let's talk about some top rushing attacks in college football. I think you guys are going to do 2 each from a conference, and then I have 2 non-Power 2 teams to talk about. Let's go Tom first, because I know Tom, if I was doing, all of college football, I might have one that I assume is on Tom's list. One that Tom and I have talked about a ton, but Tom, give me a Big Ten team that you think has a pretty potent rushing attack.
I think by virtue of me being a Penn State grad and being someone who hosts a Penn State football show, I will elect to leave them out at this point in time because I believe they have the best returning rushing attack in the Big Ten going into 2025. So it's kind of a moot point for me to rehash how great that running game is. I want to focus on Illinois. I think a lot of people were looking at the way that offense operated last year. Luke Altmaier, the former transfer from Ole Miss, took a step, had weapons in Pat Bryant and Zaire Franklin on the outside. So you lose those pieces at wide receiver. The bread and butter of this offense under Brett Bielema was the running game. And you had 2 outstanding tailbacks in McCray and Fagan. Fagan, who, by the way, is 250 pounds. So the way that Bielema changed this past season, it wasn't really changing. It was more going back to old Big Ten Wisconsin Brett Bielema. It wasn't Arkansas, ironically, Brett Bielema, where it was kind of airing the ball out. You could do a little bit more of that. I think Luke Altmaier gives you some options in the running game and the passing game that kind of give some diversity to this offense that you need. But Illinois ran the ball very, very well last year, and I expect them to do something similar this coming year. Outside of that, it's tough looking at Ohio State because it's not the Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson show. But I was so impressed, how many times did national and local pundits put a DOA mark on this offensive line for Ohio State last year? It's like, oh, they lost this guy. Running game's going to fall apart. Offensive line. And they just kept putting together offensive lines that worked. It's easy when you rotate 4 and 5 star guys in there over and over and over again. Like really a tremendous job by Ohio State. So I guess my question for this coming year at Ohio State is just who's the guy carrying it? Is it CJ Donaldson, the transfer from West Virginia, who's been productive in the past? Sam Williams-Dixon got in sparingly in the years past from Pickerington, Ohio. They have a running back named Bo Jackson, so that just kind of makes sense for them to try and use him at some point. But James Peoples, Chase Brecht, TC Caffey, Isaiah West, like they have some depth in terms of guys that just haven't gotten a lot of experience. But I'm going to be looking at Donaldson and what was the last name there again? Williams-Dixon, excuse me. I didn't want to get that wrong. I look at those two guys. I don't think it's going to be the same punch that you saw out of Judkins and Henderson last year. It's going to be different, but I expect Ohio State to have a potent attack this coming year. Honorable mention to Whittington at tailback returning for Oregon this coming season. Gosh, I mean, if you're going to help out Dante Moore, start with the running game. It's not the two-headed monster anymore with James off to the NFL, but Whittington had himself a nice year, and he runs angry. It's a Isaiah Pacheco, former Rutgers tailback, that it really reminds me of when you see him run. Like, he wants to get contact. So Oregon leaning on that, I think, is going to be a big part of it, and I expect Michigan to be right there in the mix again, alleviating things for Mikey Keene and or Bryce Underwood is going to be important. Who's the guy at tailback or guys at tailback now that Mullings and Edwards are off in the National Football League, but they continue to have very good offensive lines. So, but yeah, Penn State's still the best rushing attack in the Big Ten.
I think you got to also throw in Mekhi Hughes from Tulane that's going on into Eugene, Oregon as a really good complementary piece. This was one of the best running backs at the Group of 5 level last year. In the SEC, a team that's kind of flying under the radar, which is really interesting to me because I figured more national pundits would talk about it because the style of offense they run. Texas A&M has 3 guys that all could be starting running backs in most conferences, with Amari Daniels, healthy Ruben Owens, and Lavian Moss. Moss was going to go off for over 1,000 yards last year before he suffered the season-ending injury against South Carolina. Daniels is that big, burly running back that adds that physical force up the middle that will continuously pile drive forward for an extra few yards. And that's something that I think is really necessary to take pressure off of Marcel Reed. And then you have Ruben Owens, for my money, the most athletic running back in that room. And we barely got to see him last year. He was dealing with an injury throughout all of spring. He got hurt again in fall camp, didn't play throughout the year. So we barely got to see him. But when you watch his tape coming out of El Campo, Texas, he was a 5-star phenom for a reason. And if that's the version that Colin Klein gets in year 2 with this system, known for wanting to run the football with a mobile quarterback because of what he did when he was at Kansas State, they may not have a 1,800-yard rusher, but what they're going to have is very similar to what we saw at Illinois last year. 3 guys that are going to finish anywhere between 800 and 750 rushing yards for about 7 to 9 touchdowns, 5.5 to 6 yards a play. That will wear down defenses in the SEC and eventually allow you to open up the passing attack to find a Mario Craver, to find a Casey Concepcion. So I'm very bullish on what you have right now currently in College Station. I also really do like what you have at the headline in Florida. I think Jaden Baugh is one of those sleeping running backs that people didn't get to see enough attention to last year simply because of Montreal Johnson was the leading guy. But when he was on the field, he was explosive, led all first-year running backs in yards after contact in the SEC. And now he's going to have an opportunity to play that supporting cast role opposite of DJ Lagway. They have a very underrated running back room. It's a lot of unprovenness, but I do think that there is something to be said about what a guy like Jaden Baugh, that home run speed in the open field, can do. 2 more in the SEC that I think are really flying under the radar. Missouri added in Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe. This was a guy that rushed for over 1,200 yards. He had double-digit touchdowns, averaged 6.1 yards a play as a freshman, and the Warhawks realized that they had to wave the white flag when the SEC came calling, because that's a dude that's going to into a system that has produced really quality running back plays from G5 talents, such as last year what we saw with Marcus Carroll, what we saw with Nate Noel from Appalachian State. They also have Jamal Roberts on staff, who has been a part of the system. He understands what Kirby Moore wants the run game. At times last year, he played that secondary role over Marcus Carroll. So if I'm getting a 1-2 punch with Bo Pabula, I'm taking pressure off of my quarterback, who again is a mobile dude and is not afraid to tuck and run, is not going to have the same type of weaponry that Brady Cook had, but still be an impactful force when it comes to the rushing attack. And then I really look at LSU. I know that we've talked about LSU as underwhelming underneath Brian Kelly and how Garrett Nussmeier never really kind of put himself on the map as somebody who could be a difference maker or that X factor. Guys, he had 120 more passing attempts because they can't run the freaking football. They can't move the sticks on the ground because there was such insufficient play. But the one running back that could move the ball last year was Caden Durham. And Durham, I think another year in the system, they are very high on him. I think from a talent perspective, he may end up being the best running back that Brian Kelly has scouted down in Baton Rouge. And they also have 2 4-stars that are waiting in the wings. I think if you just have any bit of establishedness on the ground when it comes to the rushing attack in Baton Rouge, this is a team that's going to be able to go on a run to the college football playoff. Not just make the college football playoff, but go on a run. They have the wide receiver core. They feel better about the defensive front. They feel better about the secondary. I just need to know I have a second gear when it comes to LSU's offense.
I really like the Florida pick. I mean, I don't like it, but I was going to honorable mention them if you didn't mention them. Yeah, I really like Jaden Ball. They lost Trevor Etienne and didn't miss a step, you know. And I think Ball is an absolute stud. I like Trayon Webb a lot. I think Kanan Daniels is really good. Like, they've got a lot of young talent, and I think Florida's got one of the better again, this pains me to say all this, but I think Florida's got one of the better offensive lines in the conference and thus the country. So yeah, I think that, and you know, you want to talk about taking pressure off DJ Lagway in year 2. If they open up the running game, his deep threat, he's got maybe the prettiest deep ball in the nation. And so, yeah, I do think that Florida's way up there. All right. Outside of the power 2 for me quickly, Iowa State is probably my Big 12 pick now with, Harvey leaving UCF and Scadaboo leaving Arizona State. It made this a little bit easier, but Carson Hansen and Abo Sema, just really good versatility there with, kind of the workhorse of Hansen. He went for 752 and 13 touchdowns. Sama's explosiveness, he had a 3 touchdown, 276 yard game against Kansas State, kind of the home run threat. I think their offensive line is very veteran. I think that, Matt Campbell likes to run the ball. I think they'll be really, really good this year running. I think just the team momentum, finishing 10-3 last year, shows kind of their balanced offense. They had just under 2,000 yards rushing, which was 5th in the Big 12. I would expect them to be somewhere between 1 and 3 this year. They both catch the ball decently. And then, Hansen went for 3 touchdowns in that Pop-Tart Bowl, which I thought was really, really good. I think just the versatility there, it's not quite the Thunder and Lightning duo that we've seen in other places, but it's up there. And I think it'll be really good in the Big 12. And then again, I broke my heart by kind of giving Florida credit. I mean, Miami's got one of the best rushing attacks, again, in the country, but certainly in the ACC. Mark Fletcher Jr. will be really, really good. Jordan Lyle, I think, is kind of a breakout guy. I was talking with some folks down in Miami last week when I was down there, and they really like Jordan Lyle and his kind of home run speed. Fletcher went for 607 and 9 touchdowns last year. Lyle averaged almost 7.5 yards a carry with 400 yards as a freshman. I think they're 2 of the better running backs in the conference. Again, it is the ACC, but they've got a ton of depth. Damon Martinez going to the NFL. We saw what he did. Mario wants to run the ball. Again, one of the top offensive lines. They've really built the trenches very well at Miami, especially on that offensive line. And again, we talked about taking pressure off of DJ Lagway. I mean, I think you bring in a veteran quarterback who maybe we're sold, maybe we're not sold on Carson Beck down at Miami, but I do think that that's going to be a big, big factor. They want to run the ball first, and I think they certainly will. I like the way that their offensive line is set up. Again, one of the best in 24. I think they'll have, again, the best offensive line in the ACC in 25, and that will lead to both Lyle and Fletcher Jr. having really, really good rushing seasons. Again, unfortunately for me as an FSU guy. So those are my non-power 2 top 2.
Just real quickly before, because I know the comment section is going to come after us, and I want to make sure I can make them that way they can't come after us. Notre Dame has one of the best rushing attacks in the country, which is Darian Prince, and also the number 1 running back in Jeremiah Love. And I want to give a shout out to Louisville. Over 1,800 rushing yards last year, 19 touchdowns between Duke Watson and Isaac Brown. Isaac Brown with over 1,100 rushing yards. Combined, they averaged 7.7 yards a play. I think that's going to do wonders with taking off pressure for Miller Moss.
All right, let's go to the wild card. We got 5 minutes to wrap this thing up. Cole, what you got for me and Tom?
you guys are able to plan your perfect road trip as college football fans. Whatever you want to do, you can go there for 3 weekends. Here's the rule. The 3 weekends that you're allowed to go on are the best non-conference matchups in college football for 2025. So, snake draft, you have to pick 3 games, and I'm going to decide which road trip is better. I'll let Tom go first because Tom won the last time.
Okay, go. Never mind, Tom. You pick it.
Okay. I will go.
It can be anywhere. It just has to be a non-conference game between the 2 teams.
Sure. Texas versus Ohio State in Columbus, first week of the season.
Think that's fair?
I'll go the Battle of Death Valleys. I'll go LSU at Clemson week 1.
I like that one. All right, TJ, you're up again.
I want to back it up just a bit. You kind of messed me up with the whole non-conference thing because I was going back to Dublin week 0 if that was an option. Just because if you can go to Dublin and see college football and drink all week in the clubs, that is, I would have just won. We could have just ended the show right there. But since they said no conference stuff, obviously Iowa State, who we just mentioned, and Kansas State kicked the year off there.
So that would have been easily number 1, hands down. You get to go to Dublin and watch football. TJ, you're up again. Snake draft.
Week 2, I don't know this. I am literally quickly looking as we do this right now because
I gave your homework.
Yeah, you guys gave us a heads up, and I had a feeling of which way you were going, and I guessed wrong. So now I'm doing the same thing.
So week 2, a terrible week for college football. Yeah, I'll go to non-conference, eh? All right, we'll go to Oklahoma. Well, Michigan versus Oklahoma. I feel like that's the best game of the week. And, I know that they've certainly underwhelmed there in Norman, but a week 2 matchup, the best game of the week, we'll go there.
Yikes.
I'm still shocked that none of you have said this one yet. I may give both of you zeros this week.
Are we going week by week, though?
Wherever you want to go, whatever weekend.
Wherever you want to go.
Wherever you want to go, whatever weekend. Don't have to do the first 3 weeks.
Notre Dame at Miami on August 31st.
All right, Tom, you're up. The last pick.
Wait, is that the same, but does that happen in the same time as your first pick? Is that the same week?
Well, he just said the weeks don't matter.
I said the weeks don't matter. If he has a private jet that can fly down there and drop him off and then take him up to Columbus, Ohio, by all means, do it.
Yeah, I did not look at the schedule the way that I thought.
That is Sunday. Go. Yeah, that's the Sunday game. So I guess that would work. All right.
Alabama at Florida State. No, I'm kidding. That's not what. I'm not going that direction. God, man. I wish I had done a better job looking at this based on the information I have now. I'm trying to think very quickly. Yeah, I'm drawing a blank here, man. This is tough. Oh.
There's one that's out there.
Man. This is gonna hurt my heart, isn't it? I'm gonna have to respectfully pass because I have no idea.
All right, I'll let you pass. Go ahead, TJ. Make the pick.
I'm going down to South Florida. I want to see Lagway and Carson Beck. I think that's a fun one down there in week 4, I believe. So I'm taking week 3 off. I went 1, 2, and 4. I'll take Florida going down, trying to get revenge in a game where I'm a winner either way on whoever loses that one. So I'll take Florida at Miami in week 4.
All right, Tom, you had time. What do you got?
I got not. What was the game that you're thinking of?
Texas A&M Notre Dame in South Bend.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun one.
All right, well, Tom's disqualified because he couldn't even follow the dang rules. TJ, congratulations on winning, even though
I didn't memorize the entire schedule for the whole year. How do you not
have it tattooed on your brain? I do. It's fascinating. It's sitting right there. Now, TJ was already going to win because he picked for my money the best quarterback battle we will see of the season. Clay Klubnik versus Garrett Nussmeier, week 1, for an opportunity to actually claim bragging rights on which stadium is Death Valley. So if that was in your list, that automatically won in my book.
Congratulations, TJ.
Yeah, I'm undefeated. I'm retiring from the wild card. I'm going out on top. 1-0. All right, TJ Pittinger, Tom Hannifan, Cole Thompson. It's Mr. Cole Thompson on social media. It is at Tom Hannifan there, and then TJ_Pittinger everywhere as well. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure that you are subscribed here to College Football Addiction. We appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you soon.